After Piper signs the papers, the house is yours. I stopped breathing. I stood behind the half-open ballroom door, one hand gripping my wedding bouquet, the other pressed against my stomach beneath layers of white satin. Music drifted through the reception hall behind me, guests laughing, glasses clinking, someone calling for the photographer. But all I could hear was Dax. His voice came from the service hallway. Marnie, his mother, sounded impatient. "You said I'd have the deed tonight." "You will," Dax replied. "Once we're officially married, Piper will sign everything." My fingers tightened around the bouquet. Maybe I had heard wrong. Then Dax said my house's exact address. There was no mistaking it. He was promising my property to his mother. For months, Dax had talked about our future, our finances, and the paperwork he wanted me to sign after the wedding. I had trusted him enough to believe every request was about building a life together. Now I understood what he had been building. I wiped beneath my eyes, carefully straightened my veil, and took one slow breath. Before we dive into it, tell me in the comments where you're tuning in from. I love seeing the different places people tune in from. And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss more stories like this. Then I opened the ballroom door and walked back inside, smiling as if I had heard nothing. The ballroom door swung shut behind me, and the music swallowed the hallway. Dax noticed me almost immediately. "There you are." He crossed the room with that familiar easy smile, slipping an arm around my waist as though nothing had changed. He kissed my forehead. "You okay?" I looked up at him. Just overwhelmed. His shoulders loosened. "That's all." I nodded. "Too many people. Too much happening." He smiled, relieved by the answer he wanted. "You'll feel better once we get through tonight." "Tonight." I let my fingers rest against his sleeve while my eyes moved toward Marnie. She stood near her handbag, watching us. Beside it sat a thick cream-colored folder. "Is that the paperwork you mentioned?" I asked casually. Dax glanced over. "Yeah, nothing exciting." "What exactly is in it?" "Marriage documents. A few things we need to handle afterward." "Afterward? After we're officially married." The words landed differently now. I smiled. "And I signed them after the ceremony?" "Some of them." "How many?" He gave a small laugh. "Piper, it's paperwork. We can go through it later." "Of course." A waiter passed with champagne. Dax took 2 glasses. "I've got to say hello to Uncle Ray before he leaves," he said, handing me one. "Don't disappear again." "I won't." He kissed my cheek and walked toward a cluster of relatives. I watched him go. Then I looked at Marnie. She was already looking at me. I approached her slowly. "Beautiful wedding," she said. "Thank you. You look lovely." "So do you." Her fingers settled possessively over the folder. I glanced at it. Dax said that's our marriage paperwork. Marnie smiled without warmth. Men always make paperwork sound more complicated than it is. "What did he tell you was in there?" "Nothing unusual." I took a sip of champagne. "That's reassuring." She studied me for a moment. Then she said, "Once the mortgage is cleared, everything will be much easier." My hand stopped halfway to my mouth. "The mortgage?" Marnie blinked. "Yes." "What about it?" She waved one hand. "You know how these things work. With the balance being around." She stopped. I lowered my glass. "Sorry." Marnie's expression tightened. "I meant the approximate balance." "You couldn't know the approximate balance." She said nothing. I smiled gently. "Who told you what I owe on the house?" Her smile disappeared. Her smile disappeared. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then Marnie lifted one shoulder. "Dax mentioned it. He doesn't know the current balance. He knows enough." "No," I said quietly. "He doesn't." Marnie's eyes narrowed. Before she could answer, Dax appeared beside us. "There you are." His gaze moved between us. "Everything okay?" "Perfectly," Marnie said. I smiled at him. "Your mother and I were just talking about the paperwork." Dax's expression changed for barely a second. Then the smile returned. "Right. The paperwork." He reached for my hand. "Everyone's waiting for us." I let him lead me across the room, but when I glanced back, the folder was no longer beside Marnie's handbag. My stomach tightened. Dax guided me toward a small sitting room off the reception hall. The noise faded as we stepped inside. A lamp glowed beside a leather chair, and several framed photographs hung against the wall. He closed the door halfway. "I want to take care of this before the ceremony," he said. "The documents?" "Yes." "Let me read them first." Dax laughed softly. "Of course. Just sign the necessary pages, and we can go over everything afterward." I looked at him. "Afterward? We don't have much time. Then I'll read quickly. Piper. He rubbed his forehead. You're making this unnecessarily difficult. I kept my voice even. Why does it matter so much that I sign before the ceremony? Because these things are easier when they're handled together. What things? Our future. He smiled, but there was strain behind it now. I don't understand why you're suddenly suspicious. I asked to read a document. You trust me, don't you? That isn't an answer. His jaw tightened. If the future is ours, I said, you shouldn't be afraid of me reading the paperwork. Dax stared at me. For once, he had nothing ready. The silence stretched. Then I heard footsteps behind him. Dax slowly turned. Marnie stood in the doorway. The cream-colored folder was pressed against her chest. Her eyes moved from Dax to me. Dax's voice dropped. Mom, what are you doing? Marnie didn't answer. I looked at the folder. Bring it here. She held it tighter. Dax stepped between us. Piper, this isn't the time. I looked past his shoulder at Marnie. Then tell me why she has it. Neither of them spoke. And that silence answered more than either could have. Marnie remained in the doorway, the folder clutched against her chest. I brought these because Dax asked me to, she said. I looked at Dax. Why couldn't you bring them yourself? His mouth opened, then closed. Marnie shifted her grip on the folder. Dax finally said, It isn't what you think. Then tell me what it is. He stepped closer. They're arrangements for the house. Nothing more. The house. Standard marital property arrangements. I stared at him. If they're standard, why did you tell your mother the house would be hers? His face went still. Marnie immediately stepped forward. You misunderstood what you heard. I heard the address. That doesn't mean you understood the conversation. Dax's expression hardened. You were listening outside a private conversation? I didn't answer. He pointed toward the folder. You've turned one overheard sentence into some enormous accusation. Give me the documents. No. The refusal came instantly. I looked at Marnie. She wouldn't meet my eyes. What exactly have you prepared? Dax exhaled sharply. Nothing has been finalized. That wasn't my question. He rubbed his jaw. You're emotional. I almost laughed. Instead, I opened my bridal bag. Dax watched as I removed a folded document. His eyes fixed on the pages. This is the current ownership record, I said. Marnie took a step forward. I unfolded it carefully. My name is on it. Dax stared at the page. Nobody can transfer what they don't own. His confidence vanished. For the first time that evening, he looked genuinely frightened. I folded the document again and placed it back inside my bag. Have you represented yourself to anyone as the owner? He looked away. Dax! No. The answer came too quickly. I studied him. Have you told anyone that ownership was going to change? Silence. Marnie spoke instead. You're twisting everything. I turned toward her. Then why won't either of you let me see the paperwork? Dax stepped closer. Because you're not thinking clearly. I've never been clearer. His eyes dropped to my bag. You brought that with you tonight? Yes. Why? I didn't respond. His voice lowered. Who have you been talking to? Who have you been talking to? I held his gaze. That's not your concern. Dax gave a short laugh, but it sounded forced. Piper, you're making this into something it isn't. Then why are you worried about my attorney? His expression flickered. Marnie looked sharply at him. Dax turned toward her. Mom. She ignored him. She deserves to know. His voice hardened. Not now. When Dax? After she signs? The room went quiet. I looked between them. What am I supposed to know? Marnie lowered the folder. His business is failing. Dax's face flushed. Stop talking. No. You've dragged her into this. I stared at him. Is that true? He looked at the floor. Marnie continued. He owes money. More than he told you. Dax stepped toward her. You don't know what you're talking about. I know the bank rejected the last extension. Mom. And I know his creditors have been calling. My fingers tightened around my bridal bag. I looked at Dax. Why did you need my house? I didn't. Marnie scoffed. Then why have you been telling people the property could secure the debt? Dax spun toward her. I said enough. His voice echoed against the walls. I barely moved. How much? He didn't answer. How much do you owe? It's complicated. That isn't a number. He swallowed. Enough to create problems. Marnie folded her arms. He needed collateral. And my property was convenient, I said. Dax shook his head. I was trying to protect us. You were planning to use something I own. I was going to explain everything. When? His eyes met mine. After the wedding. Something inside me went cold. After I signed? He didn't answer. I looked toward the half-open door. Beyond it, guests laughed beneath strings of lights. Someone was taking photographs near the cake. Everyone believed they were celebrating a marriage. Dax reached for my hand. I love you. I pulled away. You should have told me. I was scared you'd leave. You were right to be scared. His face tightened. I slowly removed the engagement ring. The diamond caught the light as I held it between two fingers. Dax stared at it. Piper, don't. I placed it in my palm. This was never about building a future together. That isn't fair. You planned around my house before I even knew there was a plan. He reached for my wrist. I pulled free. Don't touch me again. Don't touch me again. Dax stopped. His hand fell to his side. Piper, please. Not here. I picked up my bridal bag. Then where? He glanced toward the reception doors. Think about what you're doing. Everyone is out there. I know. Your parents are there. My family is there. We spent months planning this. I know. You can't destroy all of that because you're upset. I looked at him. I'm not upset. That seemed to unsettle him more than anger would have. Marnie stepped closer. You're making a terrible mistake. I turned toward her. Would you still call it a misunderstanding if I gave you the house right now? She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. I nodded once. That's what I thought. Dax shook his head. You're taking this too far. No. I'm stopping before it goes any further. I walked toward the reception doors. Dax followed. Piper, wait. I kept walking. Please don't do this in front of everyone. I pushed open the doors. The music continued for another few seconds before the band noticed the sudden silence spreading across the room. Dozens of faces turned toward me. My father stood near the front, smiling at first. Then he saw my face. Dax came up behind me. She's overwhelmed, he said quickly. I looked at the guests. There won't be a wedding tonight. A murmur moved through the room. Someone lowered a champagne glass. My mother stepped forward. What happened? I took a breath. I discovered that the man I intended to marry made promises about something that never belonged to him. Dax stared at me. Piper. I didn't look at him. Marnie's voice cut through the room. This is absurd. Several guests turned toward her. I remained calm. I won't discuss everything here. Dax looked relieved for half a second. Then he realized what I was doing. I wasn't giving him the chance to control the story. My father stepped toward me. Are you certain? Yes. The room fell quiet again. I turned toward the exit. Behind me, Dax said my name. I kept walking. The train of my wedding dress whispered across the floor as I left the ballroom, while the ceremony decorations remained untouched behind me. The train of my wedding dress whispered across the floor as I left the ballroom. I reached the corridor before Dax caught up. Piper, stop. I kept moving. He came around in front of me. Just listen to me. I stopped. His expression had changed. The pleading smile was gone. Do you have any idea how much money was spent on tonight? I stared at him. That's what you're worried about? The venue. The food. The guests. Everything. I don't care about the decorations. You should. No. His jaw tightened. You're throwing away months of planning. I found out you were planning around my property. I never intended to steal anything. Then why did you need my signature? He said nothing. I waited. He looked toward the ballroom. You're misunderstanding the arrangement. What arrangement? It was temporary. Temporary what? He rubbed his face. Collateral. The word hung between us. For your debts. He didn't answer. I stepped closer. You expected me to sign over control of my house. Not control. Then what? A financial arrangement. That sounds prettier. His eyes hardened. You're making this impossible. No. You made it impossible when you decided I didn't need to know. He looked away. I opened my bridal bag and took out my phone. I spoke with the attorney who handles the property. Dax's expression changed. What did you tell him? Enough. What did he say? That no transfer, refinancing agreement, or marital arrangement involving the property can happen without my approval. Dax went silent. I watched the realization settle across his face. You checked. Yes. You were planning this. I was protecting myself. His shoulders dropped. I slipped the phone back into my bag. There's something else I want to know. What? How did your mother know my mortgage balance? He stared at me. Dax, I don't know. You do. He said nothing. I turned toward the ballroom. He caught my arm. I pulled free. I'm not finished. Piper, don't. I walked back toward the doors. Behind them, voices were still rising. Guests were whispering, family members asking questions, chairs scraping against the floor. I placed my hand on the brass handle. Dax stopped several feet behind me. What are you going to do? I looked back at him. Make sure everyone hears the same truth. Then I opened the ballroom doors. Marnie, I said, my voice carrying across the room. I think everyone deserves to hear what you were promised tonight. Marnie, I think everyone deserves to hear what you were promised tonight. The room went silent. Marnie stood beside the nearest table, her face tightening. Piper, close that door. No. She glanced toward Dax. He shook his head slightly. I stepped farther into the ballroom. Did you know about Dax's debts? Marnie folded her arms. I don't know what you're talking about. Did you know he planned to use my property as collateral? That is a ridiculous accusation. Did he tell you I would sign documents after the wedding? Her expression flickered. Dax stepped forward. That's enough. I turned to him. Is it? I opened my bridal bag and removed the property records and financial papers. These aren't accusations. Dax stared at the documents. One of his cousins leaned forward. What kind of debt? Dax snapped, stay out of it. Another relative spoke from behind him. He told me his mother would be moving into the house. Marnie turned sharply. Who told you that? The man shrugged. Dax! A woman near the cake table whispered. He told us too. Dax's face reddened. I looked around the room. I called off the wedding because I realized my marriage would have started with people deciding what they were entitled to before I ever agreed to give it. Dax moved toward me. You're humiliating me. No. I'm telling them why I stopped. I love you. The words came quietly. I looked at him. Love doesn't require a deed. His mouth tightened. Nobody spoke. Then a man near the back stepped away from the wall. Bram. Dax's business partner. He looked uncomfortable. Piper. Dax turned. Bram, don't. Bram ignored him. There's something else you need to know. Dax's expression changed. Not here. Bram shook his head. She needs to hear it. I looked at him. What? Bram glanced at the papers in my hand. Dax has been using your name in financial conversations for weeks. The room seemed to shrink around us. Dax stepped toward him. Bram. I've got records. Bram reached inside his jacket. Marnie moved quickly toward him. Give me those. Bram pulled the documents away. No. Dax stared at him. For the first time that evening, even Marnie looked frightened. Bram held the documents against his chest as Marnie stopped inches away. Give me those, she repeated. No. Dax looked at him. Bram, think carefully. I have. He turned toward me and handed me the papers. I looked down. There were notes, emails, and financial summaries. My name appeared repeatedly. I read one line twice. Dax had told a creditor that marriage would give him access to the property. Another document referred to my house as an expected source of collateral. My fingers tightened around the pages. He told them this? Bram nodded. For weeks. Dax stepped closer. I was negotiating. You were using my name. I was explaining the situation. To people you owed money? His silence answered. Bram spoke quietly. He made it sound like the ownership arrangement was already decided. Marnie reached for the papers again. I pulled them away. Don't. She froze. You don't understand what those documents mean. I understand enough. Dax looked around the ballroom. Everyone needs to calm down. I almost smiled. You've been telling people a story for weeks. Now you're worried about one evening. His face hardened. I never meant for this to happen. You meant for me to sign. I meant to fix everything. With my house. With our future. I shook my head. You didn't ask me. He lowered his voice. I knew you'd say no. There it was. Not an excuse. An admission. I folded the documents carefully. I could destroy you with this. His eyes lifted. I continued before he could speak. But I won't. Dax stared at me. I don't need revenge. I looked around at the relatives who had come dressed to celebrate us. I only need everyone who has promised something to know the truth. Marnie looked toward the guests. People were already gathering their coats. A few avoided her eyes. Someone quietly told a waiter to stop serving champagne. Dax stood motionless. His carefully arranged version of events was falling apart without me having to raise my voice. I placed Bram's documents inside my bridal bag with the property records. Then I turned toward the exit. The wedding dress dragged softly behind me. I had almost reached the doorway when Dax spoke. Piper. I stopped. He didn't come closer. There's something you don't know. I turned slowly. His face had lost all its anger. What? He swallowed. It's about your father's estate. My hand tightened around the strap of my bag. What about it? Dax looked toward Marnie. Then back at me. She found something in the estate records. My pulse quickened. What did she find? Dax's voice dropped. A clause concerning your house. I stood still. He had one more secret. And this time, I intended to hear every word. I turned toward Dax. What clause? He glanced at Marnie before answering. Your father put something in the estate documents. What? He restricted what could happen to the property. I studied his face. How do you know? Marnie stepped forward. We found the records while researching the house. My stomach tightened. You researched my family? She didn't answer. Dax continued quickly. The clause could have caused problems once we married. What kind of problems? He hesitated. It gave you control. I almost laughed. You called that a problem? It meant the property couldn't simply be transferred. Transferred to whom? Neither answered. I opened my bag and removed the copy of my father's estate documents I had kept with the property records. You should have read the whole thing. Dax stared at the pages. I pointed to the relevant section. My father left the house to me. Yes, and he specifically protected my right to make every decision concerning it. Dax's face fell. Marnie reached for the document. I pulled it back. No. She stopped. Dax looked at me. So that's it? No. I folded the papers and returned them to my bag. You spent months believing you were getting access to my future. His expression tightened. I loved you. You loved what you thought marrying me would give you. That isn't true. Then you should have trusted me enough to tell me the truth. He had nothing to say. Around us, guests continued leaving. Conversations stayed low. Nobody looked at Dax the way they had earlier. I turned toward the doors. Marnie called after me. Piper. I stopped but didn't turn. You'll regret this. I looked back. No. I'll regret that I almost didn't notice. I walked out. The night air met me beyond the entrance, cool against my face. Later, when I stepped inside my house, the rooms were exactly as I had left them. The familiar furniture. The photographs. The quiet hallway my father had walked through countless times. I carried my wedding dress into the bedroom and removed the engagement ring. I placed it beside the property documents. Then I looked at the deed. My name was still there. Nothing Dax had promised his mother had changed that. I walked to the front door, turned the lock, and stood for a moment with my hand resting on it. Then I let go. Dax had expected me to surrender my future because I loved him. Instead, he had lost his place in it.